This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply.
This is Rob Long with Martini Shot for The Ankler. Years ago, a well-known comic actor hosted his own late-night talk show, and the show received dismal ratings and terrible reviews, and midway through its 13-week initial run, it was canceled. But only a few days after such a spectacular and public failure, that guy was sitting at an outside table at the old Columbia Bar and Grill. I have no idea what it's called now, or even if there's a restaurant there on the corner of Sunset and Gower. But for a long time, that's where everyone on that side of town went for lunch or for after-work drinks. It's where all the people who worked on the comedies that shot at Paramount spilled into when they called rap. Anyway, there this guy was, hours after his spectacular failure, having lunch with a couple of old friends. I mean, in his shoes, a lot of us would be thousands of miles away for months, maybe years. I mean, I know I would, and I'm not even the most cowardly person I know. It was a heroic performance, the bravest lunch I have yet seen eaten. And as he ate and chatted with his party, kind of casually, industry types would pat him on the back or give him a thumbs-up gesture as they passed by. A few would murmur, "Good for you." Some would claim loudly, "I love the show." And some really smart ones would opt for the more sophisticated surgical strike compliment. "My kids were really wild about that show," they said. None of this was true, of course. It was an embarrassing disaster. The show was terrible. But in show business, we admire anyone who can eat lunch a day or so after a financial and career failure. I mean, it's often said about people in this business, but mostly by people who are not in this business, that we're heartless and unforgiving, which is not true. We relish failure, we wallow in misfortune, but we live to applaud the down and out. I mean, when people call you brave in the entertainment business, it's almost always because you've done something that really sucked. So it was not surprising to see the parade of well-wishers file by that afternoon. Now, one of them, a guy who was president of the international television distribution arm of a large studio. I mean, a guy I knew for a fact did not know that actor from a hole in the ground. He walked by him, stopped, put his hands on the guy's shoulders and said, "You're very brave." And then he leaned down and kissed the failed talk show host on the top of his head. And while I could not bring myself to go that far, the spirit of full disclosure requires me to admit that when our eyes briefly met across the restaurant patio, as happens occasionally in public places, I mean, I was not staring at the man, honest, I caught myself giving him, a man I haven't met either, a raised eyebrow, rueful smile kind of greeting. Because the trick, I think, to surviving in show business is deciding at the very beginning that you get to choose when it's over. Because people will say things like, "You'll never eat lunch in this town again," or use phrases like career death or "can't get a meeting." But the truth is always that, yeah, you can. I mean, maybe not with the people you used to meet with, at least not at first, but most of the things that happen in show business that are actually bad or just actually being embarrassed. That's really a second act feeling, to be honest. And if there's one thing we know in show business, it's that second acts are important, but it's the third act that really counts. Here's what I mean. Once at the end of a meeting, I said a colossally stupid thing. Here's how it went down, the bare bones. Anyway, I'm not terribly interested in giving what journalists call the complete TikTok of events. It's still actually painful to remember. But for reasons that only a highly trained clinical psychologist could explain, I think that by sharing my stinging shame that lasts to this day with thousands of strangers, it'll somehow make it less painful. Okay, so cut to Interior Network Television Office Day. I'm in a meeting with a TV network about a script that they like that I'm involved with, and they're actively interested in producing the script. So I am actively trying to make that happen because, well, in the first place, money. But in the second place, I love the script. I think it'll make a terrific show. And in the third place, because I like this network a lot. I'm a huge fan of what they're doing with their shows, both then and now. In other words, from the moment we all sit down together and make small talk and sip from our little water bottles, it's a positive, creative meeting. Where we want to go with the series is where they want us to go with the series. Their concerns about our storylines are our concerns about our storylines. Our casting hopes are their casting hopes. It's all about, it's about as collaborative and as fun as a meeting can be, as a meeting I've ever been in. 30 minutes in, we're all kind of exhausted from just loving each other so much. And that is the time to quickly get up and leave. Because if you let a terrific meeting go on even 1 second longer than it should, somebody is going to say something stupid. And in that case, that someone was me. And we're all wrapping it up, and I refer to another show on their network, kind of, casually, just a passing compliment on the way out. Another show on their network that I particularly love. I lavish it with a compliment. I really admire how you guys have supported this show, I said. And then suddenly, silence. The room turns thick with awkwardness. And then someone says, well, we like that show too, but it's not on our network. Now, the right thing to do here is to laugh and apologize profusely, but that is not what I did. Because for the life of me, and I would have bet $1 million on this, I could have sworn that the show was on their network. And my brain sort of froze up because what I wanted to say was, I think you're mistaken. I think that show is on your network. But another part of my brain was shouting, stop talking, stop talking. They know what shows are on their network. That is the minimum requirement for working at a network. So I stood there awkwardly, even more awkwardly, in the middle of a terrible second act awkwardness. So the question is, what happened? How could I make that mistake? And there are two basic answers to that. One, I'm an idiot. I often speak without vetting the words. And two, and these are not mutually exclusive, of course, but I think the second one is sort of interesting. I was experiencing that particular show as a fan, not as a TV insider. And fans don't know or really care what channel a show is on, especially these days. Fans watch a TV show here and a TV show there, like a hotel brunch buffet. Networks like to think they're branded and identifiable, and they spend a lot of money on consultants to tell them that they are. But if you somehow manage to meet an ordinary American and ask them to identify the streaming service or network on which their favorite show appears, they'll just as likely get it wrong as get it right. So yes, I said a stupid and embarrassing thing, but in a way, it was kind of a compliment. I associate my favorite shows with that network, and also a kind of a sign of the new TV industry in which individual shows have more prominence and power than the network they appear on. That's what I kept telling myself in the third act. When I think about that moment that happened in the second act, and I wince. And by the way, sharing the story with all of you people has not abated the painful memory. But what I didn't do was quit the business, although one of my partners in the show suggested I do just that, because, and I know that saying something idiotic in a meeting isn't the same kind of disaster as having a terrible talk show implode, but in both cases, the thing to do is to swallow the embarrassment and allow yourself to be kissed on the top of the head by the president of Scripted Entertainment and International Sales. And to wait until that happens. Now, that's not the worst show business story I have. This is the worst show business story. It didn't happen to me, but I'll let you decide what you think the third act should have been. At an entertainment company-wide retreat not too long ago, the media conglomerate that owned a movie studio and a TV network and a lot of other things besides invited all of its top managers, the presidents of all the divisions, and in show business, there are a lot of presidents, to an oceanside resort, I think it was in Santa Barbara, for what they call an off-site meeting. A chance for all of the far-flung top dogs to meet each other and talk and, I guess, work better together or something. So at night, after the seminars and team-building exercises, and that seems to me to be the worst part of being an executive, team building exercises, they had a guest speaker come to entertain, and he was a hypnotist. So he asked for volunteers from this very type A, very driven, very competitive crowd, and he got a few, and he quickly put them under. Pretend you're a dog, he said, and they all barked. Pretend you're underwater, he said, and they all started swimming around in the air. Pretend you're 5 years old, he said, and two of them started acting like 5-year-olds. But one of them, unfortunately, the toughest, most competitive guy in the room, started crying and wailing and flashing back to his, we all know now, really awful, awful childhood. And he got so deep into it and so lost that they, had to call the whole evening to a halt. Now, he left the company a couple of weeks later. He left show business, actually, a couple of weeks later, because it's just hard to be the toughest guy in the room when everyone has seen you cry like a 5-year-old. I mean, it's impossible to intimidate others when there's snot streaming down your face, I guess. But I think he made a mistake. I think he should have stuck it out. He gave up in the middle of the second act when he should have marched down to breakfast the next day, sat at a table in the middle of the room, and let everyone give him that rueful half-smile thumbs up, and just wait for someone to kiss him on the top of the head, which would have happened. Because in show business, there is always a third act. There is always somebody who's going to walk by your table and kiss you on the top of your head. And that's it for this week. Next week, we will scroll for The Ankler. This is Rob Long with Martini Shot.